Welcome to the Kindness Podcast. I am joining you from my Aunt Mary's house. I hope all of you have an Aunt Mary because it's the Aunt Marys of our world that remind us like kindness is good, it's deep, it's not complicated, it's as easy as just sitting next to somebody and saying, tell me about your day. Oh, I love my Auntie Mary. So today I have the pleasure of introducing you to a woman that I met several years ago, and she, I joke, has saved me from jail time. Nicki Koziarz is a 2-time best-selling author. She's recently released her 3rd book, and many times, I would say not in COVID season, but the rest of the time, you can find Nicki center stage teaching people and speaking to people from, whether it's conferences or churches or wherever she is. Nicki has a heart for sharing what she's learned and the downloads that she's gotten in life with others. So, Nicki Koziarz, thank you for joining me today. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, Nicole. This is so fun. You're so fancy with your graphics and music. Like, I'm super impressed.
Okay, well, I listened to your podcast. I like it very, very much. And you have fancy music and things too. So,
You would die if you knew how I did that podcast. It is the most professional.
I feel it's so good to like pull back the curtain sometimes and let people know like what life really looks like, right?
It's real scrappy. Let's just say it's that.
Yeah. And that's okay. Well, and I joke that you saved me from jail time because I did not know when I started out in the kindness business, how many ever years ago, that you couldn't just randomly take photos from the internet and use them as your own in graphics you make,
Can't do it. People see you.
Yeah, I went to a workshop that Nicki was hosting, and she was like, by the way, ladies, like you've got to credit things and know where they came from. So anyway, thank you for that. You saved me.
Absolutely.
Hey, will you tell everybody where you are and what you're about and just how you like to explain yourself? Because I know you're sitting on a farm right now and it's pretty cool.
Listen, I'm sitting on a very muddy farm, so it's not really cool right now. In fact, right before I hopped on here, I'm grateful that I remembered it was a video because I didn't have any makeup on, and I was like, oh shoot, I gotta go put some makeup on. But I was actually pressure washing the front porch because it is covered in mud right now.
Oh,
where do you live, Nicole?
South Dakota.
Okay, so
in the deep freeze.
About all the drama in the South with the snow and the rain this year. We have never had so much rain ever since we've moved out here. And when I mean it is up to our knees, it is up to our knees. But today it is beautiful. It is like 65 degrees and I am as happy as can be to be back on the farm today. But my husband and I bought this farm almost 7 years ago. This summer will be 7 years, and it was foreclosed. And so it had sat empty for about 2.5 years. And you couldn't even really see the house. It was so overgrown with bushes and weeds, and there was snakes in the pool, and like it was a disaster. And I remember we brought my parents to show us, like to show that we were so excited. We're like, we found such the most amazing property, and we brought them out there, and they were like,
yeah.
What? You're gonna pack up our grandkids from little suburbia and bring them out to this? But we have had so much fun, a lot of hard work, but it's beautiful now. And we have cows and horses and pigs and chickens and donkeys and dogs, all the things, all the farm things.
You have 3 girls. So how do the girls like that? That screams to me like my 5th grade son. But what do your girls think?
Listen, we could use some boys around here.
You can have one. I'll bring you one.
When last weekend when I was out there we were trying to move our horses because there was so much mud, they had to get out of this one area. I was like, somebody needs to get married like real quick. I'm burned out with all these projects. But so my older 2, they are not really into the farm life too much. They like it to like take pictures and post on Instagram and like, the vibe. But my youngest daughter, she is very much the horse girl. In fact, she's teaching me all about my horse now. So she's out there, in the summer all day with her horse and riding and all the things. So she loves it. But the other 2, she is 15.
15. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
So the other two, I don't know. They can pretend to be farm kids.
No. We'll get married, have some babies, and marry some strapping man who can, take over for Nicki in the farm, please. So Nicki, your book Flooded is really, so it's been my bedside table companion. I'm going to tell you that because I don't feel like I really struggle with debilitating doubt. Certainly, I mean, yeah, I doubt things sometimes, but I started working on a new book, and I feel like I am called to write this book, and yet it's like pulling out my teeth. It's so hard. And I just think I cannot do this. I cannot do this. And so reading Flooded has been so great for me because I'm like, oh my gosh, like the woman knows, like she knows exactly what it feels like when you just are like, I gotta give up. I'm underwater with this. And when you were writing this book, the 2 years you spent writing this book had to have been some of the worst of your life. What was going on?
Yeah. So here's the interesting part of this story. So first of all, I'm grateful that the book is helping you work through your own struggles, because self-doubt, I think there's two types of doubt. There's the self-doubt, and across the board, we struggle with that. But then we also have faith doubt. We struggle with our belief in ourselves, but also in God helping us through things. And so I'm a faith girl for all of you out there. And so God is my source of strength. And so for sure had some major struggles with doubt. I thought the hardest thing that I had walked through at that point in my life was my mom had a brain tumor, and it was stage 4 cancer, and she was given 6 months to live, and she was only 62, and it was just a really, really tragic situation. And so I walked with her every day through that, and I thought that was the hardest thing that I had ever walked through. But during that season, my only brother, had tried to commit suicide 4 different times. He had struggled with addiction and bipolar, and it was a really hard time. So dealing with him and all that. And after my mom died, it kind of began this trickle effect of like more hard things that kept coming. Oh. And as soon as I had, so the way, the way it works with a book contract is you pitch the idea months before you actually start writing it, because it takes time to get the contract and everything. So literally, I started writing it last October, and the first week in November, my brother committed suicide. Mm-hmm. And so I had just started writing this, and had to handle that, and then got home, and then our horse died. And for those of you that have ever been on a farm, it's just like a pet. Your dogs, but like there's something different about horses. I don't know. Like I've had all the pets die at this point. And I can tell you that losing a horse was the hardest. I don't know if it's just because they're so big, and they just require so much work. But that was really hard. And then we also had an exchange student living with us at the time, and it was just a lot of hard things we're working through with that. And then COVID hit. And so all of that, I'm writing this book in the midst of, and I'm kind of scared to ever think about writing another book, because I'm like,
don't do it. Yeah.
I don't think I need to go through any more hard things. But I'm also grateful because it really allowed me to get to a very raw place. And it made me, you know this from writing, it makes you sit in your pain. And I think sometimes with grief, we want to just rush through it. Like you get 3 days off in America for a death, and then you're expected to be back at work. And that's just not how grief works. And so there was a lot of healing that came from that writing of that book, but also a lot of wrestling with God. I had some questions, and I needed answers. And I'm here today to tell you I didn't get all my answers. But I was able to get to a place of being able to believe in God again, believing in myself again, and having that what I call holy confidence to move forward in life.
And it's interesting because in that book, you never profess to getting it, like you never say like, okay, I used to be on this side of grief, or I used to be on this side of pain, and now I'm here. You never say that you've arrived at the final answer. And I appreciate that, because I'm like, oh my gosh, like I don't think any of us ever do. It's just, it's an evolution, right? It's a continual like crazy train, a crazy line as we go from like what we believe or don't believe, or what we feel or what we don't feel. And that pain that comes and then subsides and then comes back. And so, if you feel like you've got it all whipped, then it just kind of smacks you in the face again.
It does.
Yeah. Well, what were some of the things that people said to you, especially with the death of your brother, that were helpful or maybe unhelpful? Here on the Kindness Podcast, we love to give people tools for just being kind.
Yeah. Yeah. So there was a lot of well-intentional people in my life, and I share everything very publicly, which is an up and a downfall of what I do in life. And so with both my mom and my brother, I had invited people into that process with me, because I think it's healthy to walk with people through their pain, and not try to act like we've got it all together on social media all the time. But obviously, because of that, you do invite in a lot of opinions. And so some of the things that, I would say were not helpful with both my mom and my brother was, I think people try to make sense of things that don't make sense sometimes.
Oh.
We are, like, especially in the Christian community, people will say things when somebody loses somebody like, oh, God just needed another angel in heaven, or, God did answer your prayers, but just not the way that you were praying. And, or, God was just finished with that person and took them home. And, I'm not here today to have a theological debate about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I just know in those moments, those are not the things that make people feel well. And so I can't tell you a whole lot of things that people said that I feel like were helpful, but I will tell you something I learned to say to others, that I felt like this is what I wanted somebody to say to me. So when my mom died, because I had walked with her so closely day after day, I just wanted somebody to say, you loved your mom really well. And I saw that. And so when you're walking with someone through grief and they're going, like, I have another friend right now that's going through a similar situation with her mom. And those are the things I keep saying to her. And she says, thank you. Like, that's what I needed to hear today. Saying things like, you were a good sister. Because my brother, obviously with his struggle with mental illness, he had burned a lot of bridges in our family. And the day that, he took the bottle of pills that ultimately took his life, I remember I was on the phone with the doctor, and the doctor was like, I just don't even think you're going to make it, because he lived in Seattle and I lived in Charlotte. And I said, well, I'm going to do everything I can to get there to him, because nobody deserves to die alone. Mm-hmm. And so just people recognizing that part of my journey, instead of just like, I'm so sorry, things like that, just really affirming people's actions, whether you agreed with them or not, I think is really helpful when someone's walking through a hard time.
Gosh, that's so great. We have one woman who's tuning in right now, and she said prayers to you and your family on the loss of your mother and your brother. And she said her mom died in September, and she has good days and bad days, and she needs to take one day at a time. Do you have anything else that you'd add for her?
Yes. First of all, I'm so sorry. But I think one of the greatest things that you could do is to try to not put your grief in a box. And so one thing that also was not helpful in that season was like the constant reminders from people, like when her birthday would come or his birthday, and that 1 year anniversary. For some people, that is a really important day because they put their grief on the calendar. And so their grief, like, they're going to be sad on those days, and that's fine. That's their process. But I actually don't think that's a healthy way to handle grief. I think you need to let your grief be dealt with when it comes. So you want to know, like, the days that are really the hardest for me are the days like when one of my girls says something to me that's just like so off the wall, and I'm like, I wish I could tell my mom that right now. Like, those are the hard moments. It's really not the Mother's Day or the birthdays. It's these really simple moments. So don't skip over that pain that you feel for those simple things that you long for. Like, when your grief comes, let it come If you got to cry, cry. If you got to run, run. If you got to scream, scream, but let it come, and don't just put it on the calendar on those certain days.
Christy Rhodes, someone watching, says, this is amazing, wonderful words of wisdom. So thank you, Nicki, for that. Okay, let's talk about this book, Flooded, that has helped me so much. And it's interesting because, I think whether someone grew up in a church or not, I mean, we maybe have heard about Noah and his ark. And, who built the ark? Noah, Noah. It's like everybody may even have a little song. Maybe that's just me, but I feel like, we got a little song here. So how did you get to the point where you wanted to take in this book this childhood character or caricature sometimes even, and like, how did you make him into a real human that felt flooded, that felt some of the same things, someone you could learn from?
Yeah. So kind of the rhythm that I have as a Bible teacher, and I don't know that other Bible teachers would agree with my rhythm, but that's okay. To each his own.
Yeah.
Is I like to take a struggle that I'm having, a God struggle, and I put it through the lens of somebody in the Bible, because I really believe, yes, pastors are great, counselors are great, mentors are great, friendships are great. But you guys, honestly, for every hard thing that we would ever walk through in this life, there's actually somebody in the Bible who's walked through it harder than we have. And so there's a lot of things that we can learn from people in the scriptures. And so when I was struggling with doubt, I kind of sat with God and I was like, God, show me somebody who could teach me some things about this. And, I had been really interested in Noah for a long time, but then I just went back one time and just reread it. And I was like, this man had every reason to doubt and had every reason to not do this. And so here's the interesting thing. So the book is called Flooded, the 5 best decisions to make when life is hard and doubt is rising. And so in some Bible stories, you'll study them and you have words. So like Rachel and Leah is another set of Bible people that I've written on. And there's a lot of conversation, a lot of cattiness that we could study and unpack for our lives, okay? Mm-hmm. But with Noah, there is actually no words that we can study between him, his wife, his kids, God, anybody until the very end, which it's a hot mess at the end, surprise. But what we see is God commands and Noah obeys. And so there's this process of obedience that Noah walks through in his life that was incredibly challenging to me, because here I was presented with this huge assignment of God. I mean, hard things is something that God entrusts us with. Like, nobody wants them, but yet they're there. But God knows that there's things that we can learn and grow and glean from those hard things if we'll let them. Okay. A lot of times we just want to press the easy button and skip over it. Yep. So Noah was able to show me decisions that we can make specifically with God, to help us rise above the doubt that the hard things in life bring. Because I think everyone listening to this today understands, like, hello, 2020 and even 2021, it has been hard. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of doubt that is stirring up inside of us. Are we ever going to get through this pandemic? Is life ever going to return to anything that feels normal? Are my finances going to be okay? Are my friendships going to survive what happened during the political season? Like, is my family going to be okay? These are all questions of doubt that we're all asking right now.
Yeah, they are. So then the question is, and I don't know if you can answer this or not, but for people who don't have a faith, they don't have, a love of the Bible, or they don't want to look through the lens of those characters. Was there anything you learned that could be helpful and practical for people just with general doubt and not just God doubt?
Well, I mean, everything that I do is based on faith. And so that's a hard place for me to go. But here's where I can stretch myself a little bit. Okay. I think so you have God doubts, but then you also have self-doubt. Okay. And so a lot of times when we're walking through something really hard, it becomes very easy to start to view ourselves as failures somehow. And so we start to think about our hard circumstances. They become something that defines us. Okay. And so self-doubt is actually a form of pride, believe it or not. Normally we think of pride as like this puffed up, like I'm better than you kind of thing. But really, and again, putting this through the lens that I look through life, pride is any way that like you were created by God. And so when we start to think of ourselves in any other way, shape, or form than the way that he created us to be, that becomes a form of pride because we're putting our thoughts higher than his. Okay. So for those of you that lean more towards not really having that type of faith, here's what I would say though. Even though you may struggle with that and that's not kind of your go-to, you do have a go-to script in your mind when life starts to get really hard. And so I think, when I was walking through this season with my mom and then also my brother and then the dozens of other things that happened during that season, and I didn't put this in the book because I didn't figure this out till afterwards. We have something in our lives called confirmation bias. Have you ever heard of this, Nicole?
No.
Okay. So it's really, it's what we believe, and whether you believe in God or not, you believe something. Okay. Yes. And so everyone has some type of belief. And when we're walking through a hard situation, what we believe often is what ends up happening. So,
like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Kind of, but it's really, we start to look at the world and we look for that confirmation of what we're experiencing. So for example, when I was walking through my brother's suicide, I started looking at the world of mental illness in a way that I've never looked at before. Okay. But you got to be careful because it can start to write this story that's not even happening inside of you. So confirmation bias is important to recognize, but it's also important to decide what you believe before you get to the hard things. So for me, because I made the decision to believe God, I was able to walk through those hard things and see God because I was looking for God. Yeah. Now, if you want to use the word joy or peace or trust or hope or whatever word you want to use, you got to decide before you walk through the hard thing that that's what you're going to look for in life, because what you look for is what you become.
Oh my goodness. And I know the people who have heard me speak or whatever are going to say, oh, Nicole says what you look for is what you'll see. So, I mean, yes, you're speaking my heart on that one. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it is so important to know before you walk through it, what are you going to see? What are you going to look for?
What do you believe? Yeah.
What do you believe? This has been so fun, Nicki. I've loved talking with you. Before I let you go, do you have a favorite kindness story or something that you want to share?
I do.
Oh, good.
I love these stories that you're doing here on this podcast. This is so great. So I remember it's probably been 20 years now, but this is honestly the nicest thing, the kindest thing that anyone has ever done. So when my husband and I, when we got married very young, that's another story for another day. But we walked through a lot of financial hardship. Our first couple of years of marriage, we had major surgeries and he lost his job and it was just really, really hard. And we ended up having to sell his truck to help pay some medical bills. And some people at our church, they were just listening to our story one day. And I wasn't complaining, but I was just talking about how I was having to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning with the baby and drive him to work every day if I needed a car that day, because we were one car. And a couple weeks later, they called us and they said, hey, we just want to come over and just talk to you guys. And they brought 2 cars with them though. And I thought that was really strange. And they said, we just know that you're really walking through a hard time. And we can't bear the thought of you having to take that baby out in the cold at 5 o'clock in the morning to drive him to work. So we just want to give you this car. There's no strings attached. And I just remember sitting there, I was just weeping. I just couldn't even believe it. Like it was just so much kindness in that moment. And here's the best part of the story. So they told us, they said, the only thing is you can't sell the car. Like when you're done with it, you have to give it to somebody else.
Oh, wait. They gave it to you? They didn't even say borrow this for a few months so you get back on your feet.
Gave it to us.
Wow.
Yeah. Gave it to us. But the caveat was we had to give it to somebody else.
Oh.
So we put so many miles on it that it wasn't that great by the end by the time we got it, but we were able to gift it onto somebody else, and it was really special.
Oh my goodness. Kindness is contagious. I love that. You get to feel it, and so many feeling as the receiver and as the giver. Oh, Nicki, it's been so great. So great talking with you. We'll have we'll have your, the name of the book and where your website and all of that in the show notes so that people can find you. Cause I know they're going to want to connect. And I just thank you for your wisdom today on the Kindness Podcast.
Thank you, Nicole. This was so great. I love what you're doing. Thanks for having me part of it.
Thanks. All right. Goodbye, everybody. We'll see you next week. Thanks for joining us today on the Kindness Podcast.